Alright, so this is the rear setup for the Genesis. This is, I think, the easiest part of the whole install. The front is where you're going to spend most of your time. The rear, it's a very simple install. Okay, so we're going to remove the top portion of the coilover. These are 14 millimeters. They're actually soft. They're not really hard to take off. Doesn't require a lot of pressure. So once these come off, this cap slides down. Once you have this loose, just remove that and you're set. So basically this is already loose, so you can get a panel popper and just basically stick it in, and it will release the actual glue that comes from dealer. It's like the sealant they have for an anti-rust, and basically that's loose and that's done with. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna remove the bottom part of the shock itself. It's good to use a torque wrench or a breaker bar to remove these bolts, because they're really tight in there. Once you get it loose enough, you know, you can also loosen the back one since you're already here. We're not gonna remove it yet, but you can release it. That way it's loose when you go to remove the other half. Okay, so you don't have to worry about the shock going anywhere. Bolts out. Alright, so now we're going to need two people for this, because you're going to need someone to push down on the actual hub itself, and then you're going to basically slide this out. Okay, so before you already have this loose, the next thing you need to do, release the actual sway bar in the rear bolt, just to give you more flexibility and pushing down the actual lower control arm. It's a 17. So now we're gonna get is, as you can see the bolt is at an angle. I don't know if you can see it, but it's at an angle right now. So we need to get it straight. The way we get it straight is you get the jack, put a jack in the bottom of this the assembly, and then when you jack up, you're gonna see that it actually straightens out. You're gonna see it. See it getting straight, and right there it's perfect alignment with the actual assembly. So all you need to do is just really tap it softly, and it slides right out. That's it. So now when you release the jack, it's going to give you more access to actually lower this when the other person pushes down on the hub right here with their foot, and that way this slides down furthermore. That's it. Okay, the only thing needed from the OEM suspension on the rear is the actual holder of the shock. So the way you remove this is by removing this 17-inch bolt. That's right here. 17 millimeter, sorry. And you just hold it against the ground, and the bracket will be as a support to loosen it. No special tool needed. There's no pressure on this, so it's not gonna go flying anywhere. Once you get this out, you basically get the new coilover You're going to slide this out of place. You're going to remove the nut that comes with it. You're going to leave this washer underneath. You're going to leave it there. And you're going to put the actual top on, the top hat. Once you put the top hat in place, you put the new, make sure you put the new washer in. You don't use the old one. And it's up to you what you want to use. But as you can see, both washers are pressure locks. In both of them, I don't know if you can see it, but they also have pressure locks in both of them. But we're going to use a new one. And the same thing to lock it in place. You know, it's good to have two people, but and it doesn't matter in which form you put it in or which direction. In that direction, as far as alignment with the actual shock. The reason why is because afterwards you can actually rotate it to wherever position you need it to be rotated to. Okay, so this is basically how this is the OEM suspension next to it. This is the new ISC Coilover. Basically how it's going to look. Sorry if I angled it wrong. So basically this is the new comparison. As you can see, the shock is much larger. The last thing you need to do before you mount the coilover on the car, the actual shock, is you need to install the damping knob. The reason why you got to install the damping knob is because once you install the shock back on, in order to adjust damping, you're going to need to remove the two bolts, drop the suspension again, and adjust damping. So make sure that you preset damping on before you actually install the suspension on the car. Okay, so before you install the new shock, basically what we're gonna do, you remember how you already loosened this bolt? You're gonna completely remove it now, and what that's gonna do, it's gonna drop this portion of the suspension down. It's gonna free the hub assembly, the brake assembly and hub assembly from the lower control arm that's here, and that will give you the ability to actually lower the arm further down and release the actual spring from the position that's in. Okay, so now with the lower arm out, so when you apply foot pressure down, the spring should pop out completely. There, see? All it is not even hard pressure, it just completely slides out and you're free. And we're not using anything from the OEM spring. All this gets tossed out with the OEM suspension. Okay, so before I install the spring, I want to note one thing to you guys. This is you can adjust. This is like a spring adjustment height right here. You loosen this Allen key number 5 right here, and that gives you the ability to turn. It gives you the ability to turn it around. As you can see here, you just turn it. It gives you the ability to turn when you loosen the Allen key. Now, the instructions tell you to put this at 15 millimeters. So if you measure this at 15 millimeters and you lock it in place, that's where it's telling you to adjust. One thing to note, that it's still going to be, the spring is still going to be free inside the pocket. Reason why? For one, it is much shorter in comparison to the OEM arm, to the OEM spring. As you can see, it's almost 4 inches shorter than the OEM one. So instead of this one being really nice and snugged inside, when you place this spring inside here, it's going to be completely free when you jack up the car. Okay, doesn't mean when you go over a bump or something that the spring is going to move or fly. It's not going to happen. Now this is a number 5 Allen key. What I'm doing is making sure that this is tight. Tying it down, and then from there I'll put it inside. Okay, so the way this is installed from factory, ISC puts this rubber garment on top, rubber sound reducer, the bottom one is not gonna have it. The reason why is because the bottom OEM already has, there's already a rubber piece inside there. So the way this is installed, this goes on top, this goes here. Once you have it inside the pocket, turn the spring. Like let's say, like right now, this is not properly set. You have to turn it. Turn the spring, and you're gonna feel that the angle keeps changing on the spring, and then you just can't turn it anymore. That's the proper position because it's locked in its place. So what happens is that this piece right here, it's locking into the inner core right here. That way you know it's properly set and you can't turn it anymore. That's the way it's properly mounting the spring. Okay, so now that the spring is properly in place, we're gonna go ahead and raise again the lower control arm and bring it back to its socket in the original position. Now, two things you're noting for here is alignment of this bolt. You're gonna do that first. You're gonna bring the bolt in, and it should slide all the way in. Sometimes this can be a little problematic to get it to set it back in place, but it'll go back into its position. Now we're gonna now that the bolt's inside, I'm gonna put a nut on it. I'm not gonna tighten it all the way, but I'm just gonna put the nut to have it in its position. There. Second thing is the sway bar end link. Check it up. So what we're looking for here, make sure that the end link lines up with the hole. And once it does, you grab the end link, back up a little more, right there, and you slide it into place. Once it's in place, you get your nut and you put your nut back in, and that's basically finished. You just gotta tighten it in place and your whole bottom assembly is back in. Okay, so last part of the install, you already have your sway bar back in, your sway bar bolt. Now it's just putting the shock back in. Shock sits really nice inside the pocket. Make sure you align the pocket first. Once that's in place, it's going to be dangling, so you're going to hold on to it. Make sure it goes through. Once it's in place, you put your bolt. You put your bolt on. Okay, now that's on. As you can see, you're going to have clearance issues here. This is from factory also. The damping knob on top, it's not gonna clear. So you're gonna have to get another person to put your foot here, pressure down, and that basically will help lower down the shock assembly. That way you can clear inside. I'm gonna show you how we do that. One foot down. There. As you can see now, that's it. Now you got to put your two bolts back in. Once your two bolts are back in, tighten it up, and your suspension dub is done. In general. Okay, so before we finish up the rear, it's completely reassembled. One thing you guys got to know is when you adjust this height the way we did it, the way I have it, this is actually preload adjustment. The rear, if you're going to notice, your preload is actually on your. It's a shock over spring setup. Here, they're individual. So the actual shock absorber, this piece right here, it's actually your ride height adjustment. Okay, and then the spring itself adjustment is preload. So right now I have this basically a max preload allowed by manufacturer. On the actual instructions, they're going to tell you, like I said, to raise it up 15 millimeters. If you can see, that's completely covering tire. It's right, like where my finger is inside is where the tire mark is at. So it's like no gap, really nice. And the rear, same crap, no gap. Now these are 19s with 245/40 19 tires on them. We also added 25 mil spacers in the rear and 15s in the front. So where fender sits, it's really nice.